An example of social construction in action is the example of the social construction of whiteness in the United States. We tend to think of race as being biological, of being about our physical features, in particular our skin color. But if we look back in history, we find that race actually has very little to do with biology and is the result of social forces. One example of this is the common belief in the 1700s and 1800s that Irish people weren't white, were a different race than other European people. You can see on the image at the left here, we have the image of a noble British woman, Florence Nightingale, highly esteemed, and then we have a racist caricature of Bridget McBruiser, who is an Irish woman. And notice that the facial features are drawn as different here. On the right, we have a racist cartoon, and the text on this, at the top of the scales, it says South on the left, and then the scale says black, and then on the right it says North, and the scale says white, and then we have a very racist caricature of a man of African descent, and then a racist caricature of a man of Irish descent. The idea being that the South has a problem with black people, the North has a problem with the Irish, and that these are the same. And notice that both of them are drawn in ways that make them look less human, that make them look more like animals, right? People thought that Irish people were more similar to apes in lots of ways. A similar racist idea has been perpetrated about people of African descent. This isn't true at all. All humans are equally far away from apes, but it was a common belief in the 1700s, 1800s. What happened is, over time, Irish people became accepted as white. And the idea today that Irish people are racially different, that you can tell who is Irish from, the structure of their face, from their jaw or something, sounds ridiculous, right? But people really believed this. One of the reasons that this change happened is that Irish communities and political organizations stood opposed to abolition, and so therefore became part of the white alliance to remain in power against and to continue oppressing people of African descent in America. And so as they became part of that alliance, also these ideas that they were biologically, genetically, physically different started to subside, to the point that now we just think of the Irish as white as the Polish or the Germans or the English or whatever. Another example of the social construction of whiteness is found in two court cases from the early 20th century. At the time, the law said that immigrants could only become American citizens if they were white. So people born in America could be citizens, no matter their race, but if you immigrated here, you could only become naturalized, you could only become a citizen if you were white. But the law didn't specify what it meant to be white, who was white and who wasn't. So in 1922, Ozawa went to become a citizen. He was born in Japan, he moved to California, he became a successful businessman, and he wanted to be a US citizen. And when he applied for citizenship, he was told, you can't be a citizen, you're not white. So he appealed it, it went to court, and he said, look, my skin is very light, it's lighter than a lot of white people. If you think about it, Japanese people often have a lighter skin tone than many Southern Europeans, for example, Italians, Spanish people, and so forth. And he also said, look, I'm culturally white. Look at my haircut and my suit and the way I speak and my business and so forth. You can imagine what the court said. The court said, no, you're not white, you can't become a citizen. And they appealed to what at the time was believed to be the science of race. So people believed, scientists believed, and had published books about it, that there were 6, races of humans, that there were 6 distinct races, and the Caucasoid race, what we now call Caucasians, what they referred to at the time as the Negroid race, i.e. people from Africa, Native Americans were another racial group, Aboriginal Australians, and then Asians, which they referred to in a very racist term as the Mongoloid race. And so they told Ozawa, look, you're a member of the Mongoloid race. When they said white in the law, sure, it's a casual term, but what they meant scientifically was members of the Caucasoid race. what we would today call Caucasians. So he was denied citizenship. Well, the next year, this gentleman Thind applied for citizenship. He was a Sikh gentleman. He was born in South Asia, which India, basically. And people from that area of the world can have quite dark skin. It's hard to tell from the photograph, but he has relatively dark skin. But they were, according to this scientific classification, members of the Caucasoid race. Historically, there was a civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, that split to populate what is the area that is now India and the areas that is now Europe. So they had a similar ancestor, and at the time they believed, based on the facial bone structure, that members of people from South Asia, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, were Caucasoid because, the shape of their noses or something, right? And so he said, look, according to the science, you told Ozawa that whiteness meant that you were a member of the Caucasoid race, and I am a member of that race, according to the science. Well, the Supreme Court said, no. You may be scientifically a member of that race, but look, everyone knows what white means, and you clearly ain't it. Right? So what we see here is an institution, the legal system, the Supreme Court, engaging in a judgment about what counts as white or not. And that this was not a foregone conclusion, that this wasn't something that could be shown in the science, wasn't obvious to people, right? But that was contested, that people debated, and they created this whiteness, which had a very important legal consequence, right? That meant that you could vote if you were an immigrant, all kinds of protections that come with being an American citizen. And so this is an example of social construction happening within institutions. And still today, we don't typically talk about people who are Asian or South Asian as being white. So from both these examples, we can see the way in which race has been historically socially constructed.